Order, please. We begin the day routine presenting and reading petitions. Presenting reports of committees. Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. Statements by ministers. Government notice of motion. Introduction of bills. Notice of motion. The Honourable Member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Liberals revealed this weekend that their trust funds took a beating on the stock market, and whereas it appears Liberals might not be able to campaign in this year's election on the trust funds earnings, and as Liberals say this year, they may have to raise election funds just like other parties. Therefore, be it resolved that this House urges the Liberal Party to seize this historic moment to surrender the questionable, untraceable money in its dubious trust funds. And, Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and pass without debate.
No. Notice is tabled. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, this is for all left-handed golfers, including me. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas yesterday, Mike Weir became the first Canadian golfer to win a major tournament on the Professional Tour Association, and whereas this is Mike's third win this year on the tour, putting him #1 on the money list ahead of Tiger Woods, and whereas he's the second left-handed golfer to win a major, joining New Zealand's Bob Charles, who won the 1963 British Open. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Mike Weir on winning Canada's first major on the PGA Tour, and I would ask for unanimous consent.
All those in favour say aye. Counter-minded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Colchester, Muscatawbet Valley.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas it is said that with age comes wisdom, and whereas members of this House will be pleased to know that their Speaker has just become a little bit wiser, as yesterday he became a grandfather. And whereas Tucker Douglas Scott was born Sunday, April 13th, 2003, weighing in at a healthy 8 pounds, 6 ounces to proud parents Rochelle and Jeremy, therefore be it resolved that members of this legislature join me in congratulating our Speaker and member for Cumberland South, who has now realized one of the benefits of growing older, and congratulate both he and his wife Linda on this tremendous news, and wish the new parents and baby Tucker all the best. And Mr. Speaker, with your approbation, I seek waiver of notice.
Question waivers are agreed. All in favour say aye. Counter-minded nay. Motion is carried. Thank you very much to all members, and thank you to the Member for Colchester, Muscatawbet Valley for that. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Hants East. I couldn't let the former Speaker, member from Deputy Premier, get ahead of me, so. Okay. You volunteering, the Honourable Member for Sackville-Cobequid? The Honourable Member for Hants East.
I hope you
Thank you.
Your grandchildren better than that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and congratulations. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Ham government has been obsessed from day one with reducing expenditures rather than ensuring Nova Scotians have adequate services in place, and whereas this government claims it saved money by axing production technology and outreach at the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, opting to give $2.2 million in annual funding for AgriPoint International, the former minister's darling, to provide reduced services for farmers at fees and no accountability for its spending. Whereas this government signed off on the enhanced NISA with its federal counterpart without proper consultation with the farmers or ensuring that they would have adequate safety nets in place because the new program will not require any provincial funding upfront or ongoing. Therefore, be it resolved that this House asks that the Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries revisit his decision to join the federal government in delivering a new safety net program for farmers until he can assure farmers that the new program is not about saving his government money, but about providing safeguards for farmers. And I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver? Here, no. Notice is tabled. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. whereas 4 young people lost their lives in a tragic accident early Sunday morning in Sydney River, Cape Breton, and whereas highway safety is everyone's responsibility, particularly when driving in wet weather, and whereas the government should pay special attention to our current programs which encourage highway safety, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House encourage the government to further develop our highway safety programs. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask for a waiver of notice and passage to debate.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Earltown Maple Syrup Festival was recently held in Earltown, Colchester County, and whereas this annual community festival served 809 meals, which featured local maple syrup donated by Sugar Moon Farm in Earltown, and whereas a festival as popular as this one would not take place without the support of so many community volunteers. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this legislature commend the many volunteer organizers of the Earltown Maple Syrup Festival while acknowledging the importance of the Colchester County maple syrup industry. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on the future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the statutory stakeholders review of the Workers' Compensation Act produced many recommendations in the Dorsey report. And whereas the Dorsey report recommended revamping how the system deals with chronic pain, providing universal coverage, including improving benefits for injured workers, and streamlining the processing of claims and appeals. And whereas injured workers fear the appeal process is becoming backlogged as it was in 1996, and that appeals are being needlessly delayed as a result. Therefore, be it resolved that the Minister of Environment and Labour investigate and, if need be, redress to the satisfaction of all injured workers their fear that undue delays at the appeal level in injured workers' compensation system are harming claimants. I seek waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Question for waiver? I hear a no. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Richmond.
Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on June 17, 1999, the Premier triggered an election and said, quote, "In the final analysis, this decision is based on my belief that the essential element in politics is being honest with the people and telling them the truth," end quote. Whereas during the launch of his election platform, the Premier also said, quote, "This plan is short on abstractions and long on nuts and bolts. Where there is a need for legislative changes, they are identified. Where there is a need for structural changes, they are spelt out. Where there is a need for money, it is budgeted," end quote. Whereas the Premier costed his vision at $46 million, despite the fact that his government has spent many times that amount since coming to office. Therefore, be it resolved that the Premier should live up to his essential belief in honesty and apologize to the people for not being upfront with them in 1999.
Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Mike Stephen of Mountful, Pictou County, has cleverly invented and produced a fly trap which is pleasing to the eye and environment alike. And whereas trapping the pests inside a box shaped like a house and made of non-toxic biodegradable material, this trap eliminates the chemicals and unsightliness of common fly traps and is also effective for fruit flies and wasps. Whereas getting his start through an employment insurance program and with the support of local businesses and development agencies, Mike brought this idea into production, founded his own company, Flystar International, and is considering other ideas he can produce and market. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Mike Stephen on turning his good idea into a saleable product and wish him even greater success with his future endeavors. And I ask for a waiver.
Request for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas a group of citizens has been meeting for 2 years to work towards creating a community newspaper in Dartmouth North, and whereas Dartmouth North Community Newspaper Society has been formed with the purpose of publishing a first edition this fall, And whereas the Society is holding its first public meeting to recruit volunteers on April the 24th at the Dartmouth North Community Centre, therefore be it resolved that the members of the Legislature offer their support and encouragement to the Dartmouth North Community Newspaper Society for their ongoing hard work to make the community newspaper a reality in Dartmouth North. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counter-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Speaker. And Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas when Tories run out of sound arguments, which is often, they play the blame game by either attacking the previous government or the federal government. Whereas Tories don't like it when their own past is mentioned, especially when it comes to promises like closing Cisco and opening more hospital beds, or saying that healthcare could be fixed for $46 million. Whereas Tories from past governments really start to squirm when you mention that the true deficit was well over $1 billion back in 1993 when they left office, and that every government since has had to deal with the legacy of their past misdeeds. Therefore, be it resolved that people who served in Tory cabinets in the 1980s and early 1990s might want to stick to current events instead of dredging up the past when they are not prepared to acknowledge the fiscal disaster they were responsible for when they were members of cabinet.
Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Halifax, Bedford Basin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Mainland North Drug Awareness Committee recently sponsored its annual anti-smoking poster contest intended to encourage students to think about reasons not to smoke. And whereas students from Burton Ettinger, Duke Danville, Fairview Heights, Grosvenor Wentworth, Park West, Springvale, and Rockingham schools participated in this smoking awareness contest. And whereas the first place winners from each school were Angela Cusack, Jenny David, Nadine Keys-Gauguin, Elizabeth Given, Jessica Grant, Sarah Beliveau, and Stephanie Fotopoulos, who was the grand prize winner. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House join me in congratulating all the winners of the Mainland North anti-smoking poster contest and all the students who participated in this worthy competition to spread the message against smoking. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counter-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable leader of the official opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas this Premier claims that the crux of growing our economy is putting money back in the hands of Nova Scotians, and whereas his government spent the last few years perfecting a financial assessment system that systematically strips seniors in long-term care and consequently their families of their assets to pay for the cost of their health care, and whereas his Minister of Health has promised that this unfair and discriminatory system will be phased out by 2007, but in the meantime, tens of millions of dollars will be taken from our seniors in long-term care. Therefore, be it resolved that if the Premier wants to put money back into the hands of Nova Scotians to grow our economy, he immediately end the long-term care financial assessment that takes so much money out of the hands of seniors in long-term care and their families. And Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver and passage without debate.
Here, no. Notice is tabled. The honourable Minister of Justice.
Dave.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 89 years ago Friday in Truro, Nova Scotia's 21st Premier was born. Whereas the Right Honourable Robert L. Stanfield is a leader, statesman, and gentleman, serving the people of this province in a variety of capacities for more than 28 years. Whereas Mr. Stanfield has received many honours throughout his career, including the designation of Privy Councillor, honorary doctorate designations from major Canadian universities, as well as being named an officer of La Plade, Ordre de la Francophonie, and of the Dialogue de Culture. I was going to translate it for the people across there, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House join me in extending birthday greetings to one of the finest Nova Scotians this province has seen, not to mention the best Prime Minister we never had, Robert Lawrence Stanfield, on the occasion of his 89th birthday, and wish him good health and happiness in the years ahead. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counter-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax, Shabakto.
Speaker, Thank you. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the federal fisheries minister declared recently that the proponent and those opposed to the proposed basalt quarry at Digby Neck and accompanying deepwater marine terminal should have their concerns dealt with under a federal environmental assessment. And whereas the fears of local fishers and residents about the effects of blasting on fish and fish habitat and increased shipping on right whales and ecotourism will hopefully get a full airing and consideration under such an environmental assessment. And whereas the other concerns of residents about the effects on groundwater, local flora and fauna, and other tourism concerns are properly the subject of a provincial environmental review, but the Minister of Environment and Labour refused to exercise his discretion to order one. Therefore, be it resolved that this House requests the Minister of Environment and Labour to revisit his decision and order a joint environmental assessment with the federal government of the proposal for a Digby Neck quarry so that the concerns of residents, fishers and local businesses can be addressed. I seek waiver of notice. Passage with
For waiver. I hear several noes. Notice the table. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Norman Ross of Sydney Mines will be competing in the 45 and over men's single tennis division beginning Wednesday in Toronto. And whereas the 2003 Canadian Indoor Senior Championship is an excellent chance for our Nova Scotian players to display their talent. Whereas this will be Mr. Ross's first national since his junior years when he competed at 2 Canadian under-18 tennis championships. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House wish Mr. Ross the best of luck the upcoming 2003 Canadian Senior Championships. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Annapolis.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Granville Ferry's Alex Morrison, founder and former head of the Pearson Peacekeeping Centre in Clementsport, is the 2002 recipient of a United Nations Medal, the Pearson Peace Medal, recognizing his outstanding achievement in international service. And whereas the Centre opened in 1994 and provides training, education, and research on all aspects of peacekeeping operations, drawing in thousands of military personnel and civilians from over 130 countries to learn about the importance of peacekeeping. And whereas resigning as head of the Pearson Peacekeeping Centre in 2001, Mr. Morrison now advises governments on dispute resolution and has assisted a provincial nonprofit group which aims to create peaceful schools. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this legislature commend Alex Morrison on the years of hard work he has put into the Pearson Peacekeeping Centre and thank him for bringing more awareness to the field of peacekeeping and wish him success in all his future endeavors. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Heritage Minister and federal Liberal leadership hopeful Sheila Copps attended this weekend's Liberal Love-In in Halifax, whereas Ms. Copps acknowledged her own government has added to the rising cost of post-secondary education because it lumped federal education transfers to provinces like Nova Scotia into the Canada Health and Social Transfer, allowing governments to redirect funding away from education, whereas Ms. Kopp further admitted that taking the cap off tuition costs was a mistake and something must be done about it. Therefore, be it resolved that this House thank Heritage Minister Sheila Copps for admitting that the federal government has failed post-secondary students in Nova Scotia by allowing federal funding meant for education to be redirected into other programs. I ask for a waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Request waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice in the future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in the Minister of Health's message in your Health Matters document states that we have more nurses than we did 3 years ago, and whereas over 1,200 nurses either left Nova Scotia or left the profession as a result of this Tory government's Bill 68, and whereas there are fewer registered nurses licensed to practice in Nova Scotia than in 1999, therefore be resolved that the Minister of Health stop spinning falsehoods about the number of nurses in Nova Scotia and be upfront with the upheaval that she and her government has created in the nursing profession with the impact it's having on wait times and cancelled surgeries in Nova Scotia. I'd like to ask for waiver of notice, Mr. Speaker.
Request for waiver. Here several noes. The notice is tabled. The honourable member for Kings North.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Kentville resident Al Jordan was one of 8 members of the Atlantic Province's Korea Veterans Nova Scotia unit that received the Queen Elizabeth II Golden Jubilee Medal. And whereas Mr. Jordan served in the 3rd Royal Canadian Artillery in Korea in 1954, spent time with Militia's West Nova Scotia Regiment, and volunteered for the King's Branch and Royal Canadian Legion Association for many years. And whereas Mr. Jordan is honoured by receipt of this prestigious honour, an award that goes out only to those Canadians who made a significant contribution to country and community, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House join me in applauding achievements of Al Jordan, who is willing to serve and protect his country, and congratulate him on receiving the Queen's Golden Jubilee Medal. I request waiver.
Question waivers it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Atlantic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Royal Canadian Legion in Spryfield has continuously played a major role in the community activities of the Spryfield area, whereas its members have resolved to honour and recognize those who have served in wartime by renaming the Legion. And whereas the late Earl Francis was chosen as the veteran to be given this distinctive honour, therefore we congratulate the Spryfield Legion under the leadership of its president, Terry Bobbitt, for its recognition of the late veteran Earl Francis and his contribution to freedom by renaming the Spryfield branch the Earl Francis Spryfield Memorial Branch 152. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Question waivers it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, hereby give notice that I'll move the following resolution. Whereas in December 2002, then Education Minister Jane Purvis made a promise to post-secondary students that she would consult with them about the debt relief program when she stated, "We're going to share our options with the students first." And whereas Education Minister Angus McIsaac failed to honour that promise by only meeting with students for a half hour before announcing last month a greatly reduced student debt reduction program. And whereas the John Ham government has over the last 4 years demonstrated a prolonged short-sightedness when it comes to the concerns of post-secondary students, who the Premier should be reminded are not only important stakeholders in the education process, but this province's future. Therefore, be it resolved, the members of this House recognize that the government is more interested in managing its pre-election messages than honouring the promises it makes to future generations of this province. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver. I hear several noes. Notice table. The honourable member for Cole-Harbour-Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the terrible conflict in Iraq may be coming to a close and military forces may be reduced as tensions ease and the rebuilding of Iraq begins. Whereas Canadian Forces ships and the aging Sea King helicopters remain part of the support effort in the Gulf, but may not be coming home soon because of tensions arising in Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia. And whereas this means Canadian Forces men and women may be required to remain abroad and in harm's way for some time using Sea Kings that may well not be up to the task assigned to them. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulate our military men and women who are serving abroad and to promise to do its utmost to hasten the replacement of the aging and inadequate Sea King helicopters they now use in peacekeeping and patrol roles overseas. I ask for waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Request for waivers. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on Wednesday, the 2003 Canadian Indoor Senior Tennis Championships will begin at the Mayfair West Tennis Club in Toronto, and whereas Bill Buckland of Sydney will be competing in the 45 and over men's singles division, and whereas Mr. Buckland will also be competing in the 45 and over doubles category. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Bill Buckland on his accomplishments today and wish him the best of luck in the 2003 Canadian Indoor Senior Tennis Championships. I would ask for waiver.
Request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas University St. Anne's student athlete John Muir of Truro was named CCAA Academic All-Canadian, and whereas John Muir was named to the CCAA All-Conference Volleyball team, And whereas John Muir was named MVP of the University St. Anne Dragons men's volleyball team and was a nominee for Male Athlete of the Year. Therefore, be it resolved that all members congratulate John Muir for his outstanding college year in which he excelled in both athletics and academics, and wish him continued success in the future. And yes, Mr. Speaker, John Muir is the son of our Justice Minister. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Question waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas donations to the Heart and Stroke Foundation help support life-saving research and health education programs across the province of Nova Scotia. And whereas canvassers for the annual Heart Month campaign in Nova Scotia raised approximately $650,000 this year. And whereas local volunteers from Shubenacadie, Lance, Enfield, Milford, and Elmsdale area were recently recognized at a reception held at the Enfield Fire Hall, therefore be resolved that members of this House thank Elspie caterer of Enfield, the campaign coordinator of Cumberland, Colchester, and Hants counties, those who contribute as volunteers and canvassers, and the countless number of people, including area businesses, for their time and donations to the Heart and Stroke Foundation. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver notice and passage without debate.
Question waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas today marks day 5 in the strike of regional residential service workers, and whereas despite the fact that the Minister of Community Services had some options available to him to avoid the strike, he took no action. And whereas those who are being impacted the most as a result of this minister's failure to act are individuals for which he has ultimate responsibility. Therefore, it be resolved that the Minister of Community Services recognize the impact he is having on the lives of the residents and their family and take a leadership role in providing support so that these parties can get back to the bargaining table. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver, please.
Question waiver, here several noes. Notice is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Antigonish Midget Minor AAA Bulldogs hockey team has shown that hard work, determination, and a cohesive team effort brings gratifying rewards. And whereas the team successfully competed in 2 high-level tournaments in successive weekends, something few players get a chance to experience, and whereas the Bulldogs edged their rivals with a 5-3 win over PEI Western Regals at the Atlantic Minor Midget AAA Championship held in Fredericton, and therefore be it resolved that the members of this House join me in congratulating the Pride of Antigonish, the Atlantic Minor Midget AAA champions, the Antigonish Bulldogs, on their outstanding win and wish them continued success. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver and passage without debate.
Waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas an estimated 100,000 people of Acadian descent will visit Nova Scotia to take part in the Congrès Mondial Acadien July 31st to August 15, 2004. And whereas this Congress will mark the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the first French settlers in North America. And whereas, thanks to great part to the Circle of Angeline Club in New Waterford, we'll be hosting some of the events marking this momentous time for those of Acadian descent. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulate the Circle of Angeline Club for its wonderful work in having New Waterford chosen to host some of the events during the Congrès Mondial Acadien in 2004. I seek waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice in future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas any accountant will tell you that a new budget should take into consideration increased cost pressures, the number of people expected to access the system, and a clear indication that any new monies flowing into the healthcare system are being used to support patient care. Whereas a no vacancy sign being placed at the Aberdeen Regional Hospital is a clear indication of increased pressures on the healthcare system in Pictou County. And whereas government has accounted for these pressures by reducing the budget for the Pictou County District Health Authority. Therefore, it be resolved a reduction in the Pictou County District Health Authority budget is proof that the health budget is based on a set of faulty assumptions and poor accounting principles. And I would ask for a waiver.
Request for waiver, several noes. Notice tabled. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Speaker, on behalf of my colleague, the Honourable Rodney, Minister of Sport and Tourism, and Culture, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on Saturday, Collins Jones Rink led Team Canada to earn a silver medal at the Ford World Cup Curling Championships in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Whereas Team Canada, made up of lead Nancy Delahunt, second Marianne Way, and third Kim Kelly, led the championship after an impressive 9 wins and 0 losses after round-robin play. And whereas Colleen Jones is the most successful skip in Canadian history with a win at the 2001 World Curling Championships and 5 first-place titles at the 1982, 99, 2001, 2002, and 2003 Scott Tournament of Hearts. Therefore, be resolved that the members of this House join me in congratulating Colleen, Nancy, Marianne, and Kim for the continued excellence in Canada's beloved sport of curling. They are true champions in our hearts and wish them luck with the goal of reaching the 2006 Olympics in Turin, Italy. Mr. Speaker, I will request waiver of notice. The question be put without debate.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas each year April marks Parkinson's Disease Awareness Month, and whereas the intent is to create awareness about the disease so that people will understand the plight of those suffering and join in the search for a cure, and whereas we need to create an atmosphere that encourages mutual support and friendship for people living with Parkinson's, their partners, families, and friends. Therefore, be it resolved that this House pledges its support to those living with Parkinson's disease, their partners, families, and friends, and hope that a cure will soon be found for this debilitating and ravaging disease. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
For waivers is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Chief Lawrence Paul of the Millbrook First Nation community was named 2002 Business Person of the Year by the Truro and District Chamber of Commerce. Whereas under the leadership of Chief Paul, the Millbrook First Nation has expanded its economic base through many initiatives including retail sales, fishing, aquaculture, and real estate development. Whereas Chief Lawrence Paul is known nationally by both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal peoples as a leader with vision whose economic initiatives benefit surrounding communities as well as the Millbrook Band members. Therefore, be it resolved that all members congratulate Chief Lawrence Paul on being named 2002 Business Person of the Year by the Truro and District Chamber of Commerce and wish him continued success as he leads economic development activity in the Millbrook First Nation community. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Request waivers is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be asking for waiver and passage without debate. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia's under-15 All-Star Girls Soccer team left Sunday the 13th of April for a 10-day tour of England, whereas the team will compete in the prestigious Durham Cup, a 12-team event that includes entries from Holland, Belgium, Denmark, the United States, and England, whereas this team is coached by Timberley resident Stephen Alt and Brookside native Dana Holmes-Giles. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature extend best wishes to our under-15 All-Star Girls Soccer team as they represent Nova Scotia this month at the Durham Cup competition in England. I ask for waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Guysmore, Port Hawkesbury.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas a Strait area community leader and a great friend to hockey, Eric Irving Tiger Mackey, passed away on Friday, April the 11th, 2003 at the age of 89. And whereas, while he was a professional hockey player for 30 years in both Canada and the United States, Mr. Mackey settled in Port Hawkesbury, where he helped design the cooling system and raise money for the area's first rink. And whereas he was the first president of the Strait Area Minor Hockey Association, coached many teams, was instrumental in the creation of the Straight Pirates Old Timers team, and today his significant contributions to the game have been recognized with an Old Timers tournament named in his honor. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House join me in expressing our condolences to Tiger Mackey's family and friends on the loss of such an integral part of the lives of all those who play or have played hockey in the Strait area. And Mr. Chairman, I request waiver of notice and passage of debate.
Such waivers are agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counter-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Atlantic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Member 2 community of Cape Breton continues to demonstrate lots of success by incorporating local economic initiatives and strategic partnerships. Whereas the Member 2 band community were able to share their recent success by recently donating $25,000 to the Cape Breton Regional Hospital Foundation. Whereas the generous donation will go towards the purchases of a much-needed MRI unit and bone densitometer for the hospital. Therefore, be it resolved, members of this House thank the Member 2 community and Chief Terry Paul for their contribution to the well-being of the larger Cape Breton community through their donation of $25,000 to the Cape Breton Regional Hospital Foundation, and I seek waiver of notice.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counter-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the political conditions in Serbia-Montenegro, and in particular in Serbia and Kosovo, are ever-changing, including the recent assassination of Serbian Prime Minister Djindjic, and whereas Sonja Petzel, a Kosovar Serb, worked with the UN in Kosovo as a translator after the 1999 war until she arrived in Canada and claimed refugee status. Whereas Sonja Petzel has recently been informed that her refugee claim has been rejected and that she must return to Serbia. Therefore, be it resolved that this House recognize the efforts of Sonja Petzel, St. Mark's Anglican Church, and other supporters to help ensure Ms. Petzel can stay in Canada. I ask for waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Waivers, is agreed? I hear a no. Notice is tabled. Orders of the day, government business, the Honourable Government House Leader.
Do now leave the chair in the House resolve the committee of the whole House on supply.
The honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to, in my time, 15 minutes that I have, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to take some time to talk about some of the issues specifically affecting my, my riding. And I want to start by saying, Mr. Speaker, for the record, that my riding is changing with the new boundaries, and there are certain parts that's actually contracting, not unlike the member from Bedford Fall River or the member from Halifax Bedford Basin or the member from Sackville Beaverbank. Our ridings were the four largest ridings, Mr. Speaker, and given the numbers we had, upwards of 20,000 or even more, I believe, for the member from Bedford Fall River, there was a need to actually have to reduce the size of the riding, and so certain parts of my riding are to be moved both to Dartmouth South Portland Valley and to the riding of Cole Harbour. And Mr. Speaker, that's because obviously most of those ridings are ones are suburban in nature. There's been a larger development in those areas in the past little while, and that's resulted in, I can speak in my riding, Colby Village and now Colby South are areas that are growing quite rapidly, and an Eastern Passage development is increasing greatly as well. So there was a need for those changes. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to take a few minutes to talk specifically about something I do on an annual basis. And this year was my 5th annual education town halls. I hold them every year in my riding in the 3 communities, Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage, and South Woodside. And Mr. Speaker, every year, this is the culmination of 6 months of consultations that I hold, starting with the principals and administrators at each school. There's, I think, 11 or 12 of them, including the high schools in my area, Mr. Speaker. I take the time to meet with those principals, understand the issues that they are facing in October of each year as the school year begins. Mr. Speaker, between October and March, I'll take the time also to go and meet with the parent-teacher organizations, PTOs as they're called in my riding. And also I take the time to meet with as many school advisory councils as possible. I do this, Mr. Speaker, because it is the most important issue in my riding. And I would suggest it's a very important issue, obviously in every riding, but particularly in ridings in growing communities with young families that have a lot of children in school, Mr. Speaker. And because of that, it is important from my perspective that I have a very good understanding of what the residents of Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage, and South Woodside are concerned about with regard to the education of their children. It is, and I would argue anecdotally, if not otherwise, the most important issue. Mr. Speaker, based on that, there's a few issues that I wanted to put on the record that I heard from constituents and school administrators. One of them, Mr. Speaker, that came up loud and clear was the issue of textbooks. And I know this is an issue that's been raised in this House before, but I think it's one that I should note. Many who I spoke to at these town halls said that they were concerned about how their children are educated by the lack of textbooks. Now, on the one hand, Mr. Speaker, those in administration will tell you that the way that school work is done these days doesn't involve a textbook for every child. But I think in many other ways, Mr. Speaker, there are many parents out there that would see that as a benefit to their child, knowing that the text could be taken home, if extra work had to be done, and that is something that was raised on a regular basis at my town hall. Also, Mr. Speaker, I think another crucial issue is resources for children who need the extra resources. And this is a major problem in our classrooms today, Mr. Speaker, and I hear it from the administrators, I hear it from teachers, and I also hear it from parents and students. The problem is that there are children, specifically with behavioral problems, that fall through the cracks every day in the school system, Mr. Speaker. Those with intellectual disabilities, those with severe intellectual disabilities, Mr. Speaker, they will, to a great extent, be provided with the resources, whether it be an EPA or whether it be a resource teacher or a learning center. Granted, there are issues there that need to be addressed. There are problems that need to be faced in those areas as well, particularly around how we implement the inclusion policy, how much funding is put to it to ensure it works effectively. But the ones that have ADD or ADHD or other behavioral issues, Mr. Speaker, they're the ones that fall through the cracks. They don't get an EPA. They don't get that assistant in the classroom to help them. And when it comes to prioritizing resources through a learning center or a resource teacher, Mr. Speaker, they're put at the bottom of the list. In many cases, Mr. Speaker, these children, these students do not even get, Mr. Speaker, the opportunity to have the support that they need, Mr. Speaker, and that's a real shame. Why? Well, partly, my understanding from talking to many, is the fact that these students have to be 2 grades behind in their development before IPPs kick in, before that support kicks in. That takes a fair bit of time. Particularly for girls, it can take a very long time because of their maturity level, Mr. Speaker. And as a result, we have a problem with these children with behavioral issues and how that will be addressed, Mr. Speaker. And this is something that I've heard every year for the 5 years that I've been doing town halls. I hear from teachers regularly that there's curriculum changes. We hear about new history courses in high school. We hear about the former Minister of Education announcing more getting back to basics, more grammar. Well, Mr. Speaker, that's all well and good. But the problem is not only making an announcement in this House, but implementing it in each classroom, and that involves professional development. That involves providing the support for the teachers so that they feel comfortable with the curriculum. They have the support they need when they have questions so that they're able to teach our children these new courses. That is something I hear regularly from teachers every year, but particularly this year it came up. 1 or 2 parents raised the issue of our disciplinary policies in schools. Are they being objectively applied? I don't think I have to speak more on that, Mr. Speaker, but I think it's important for the record to show that this is an issue that comes up from time to time. Mr. Speaker, what I heard from South Woodside Elementary School, which is a small school, a school that I come to gain a lot of respect for. It's very close to the refinery in South Woodside in the Imperial Oil area. It's a community of hard-working people, but people who are clearly in the I would call it a working class community. Mr. Speaker, that's a community that has a lot of children that need resource help. You could say there's a lot of children who are at risk or high-risk children for not finishing school. And Mr. Speaker, I speak with the principal and the PTA and the SAC in those schools on a regular basis. I work in that school in a breakfast program on a regular basis, Mr. Speaker. And they will tell you that their biggest problem is that their school is treated like every other school. Now, it's the old argument. Do we treat all schools equally? And I'll give this as an example, no disrespect to the member from Bedford Fall River. But a school in Bedford with higher social economic status probably doesn't have as many children with resource needs as a percentage of the students in the school. And Mr. Speaker, the problem is that they get the same funding, core funding per student as a school like South Woodside or a school in Whitney Pier, for example, potentially. Places where our children obviously have higher needs. And Mr. Speaker, these are the children that if they don't get that extra help, And yes, they do need extra help. If they do not get that extra help, Mr. Speaker, those are the children that won't finish high school. Those are the children that are more likely to run into the conflict with the law, as you would know, Mr. Speaker, from your previous career. These are the ones that are more likely to be requiring the social safety net in order to make ends meet, Mr. Speaker. These are the ones that don't have the training to ensure they have long-term employment. And in the long run, that also, we all know now, Mr. Speaker, that means they're not as healthy and they're going to have higher demands on the healthcare system. As a province, we will pay tenfold for children who are at risk in high-risk communities unless we invest in them in the years where we can ensure that they are able to get the education they need to succeed. So beyond the core funding that's provided to every student and every school, I would suggest it's important that Nova Scotia, and particularly the Department of Education, take a look at the need to provide more support in these high-risk areas. We see some of it now. 4+ programs or junior kindergartens, Mr. Speaker, are in the Halifax region, I think in 6 schools, one in North End Dartmouth, one in the south end of Dartmouth in the South Woodside. There's one in North Preston, I think there's 3 in Halifax. I think there's one in the member from Halifax Fairview's riding as well. Mr. Speaker, this is a good program, but it's only one program. Extra resource teachers, extra support, extra reading recovery, all those other programs are required to ensure that these schools, where you have a lot of students who need resource, who are at risk, Mr. Speaker, these schools have the support they need. And I would encourage the Department of Education and the Minister of Education to think about this as a way of providing that support. I'd be remiss, Mr. Speaker, if I didn't talk about the main issue that's talked about at every education forum I have in Eastern Passage, and that's a high school for that community. This is an ongoing issue. I know that this Tory government has made a decision that they don't think that this is a priority. I do know that when this election is called, it will be a priority for the people of Eastern Passage, and it will be my priority, talking about this, ensuring that whoever wins the next election, whichever party is the government, Mr. Speaker, knows that there is a requirement for a high school in that community. Some basic facts: it's the largest community in Nova Scotia without a high school. It has almost 12,000 people. And Mr. Speaker, it is also a school, it's also a community, Mr. Speaker, with 600 children every day that are bused out of that community, 45 minutes to an hour to go to Cole Harbour District High School. That's 45 minutes, 600 children. Any other place outside of the Halifax Regional Municipality, Mr. Speaker, 600 kids would be enough to warrant its own high school. There are debates now as to whether that is sufficient in Halifax Region or not. There are schools in Halifax Region with only 650 or 700 kids. Mr. Speaker, Eastern Passage continues to grow. It will continue to have a larger number of children bust out to Cole Harbour High School. Right now, 55 to 60% of that school comes from Eastern Passage. And I would suggest to you that there's clearly a need, not only for one in Eastern Passage, but for a 5th high school in the Dartmouth area. That's something that must be addressed. It will be addressed in the coming years. Governments can put it off as a priority now in order to build schools and cut ribbons before the election. But I can assure you it is an issue that will come up. It will continue to be put on the front burner, mainly because there's a committee in that community, Mr. Speaker, that is working hard to ensure that those that have influence on the decisions of where the next set of high schools and schools are built will know that Eastern Passage is not only on the radar screen, Mr. Speaker, but that they require a high school for their students. I want to take a couple of minutes, Mr. Speaker. Maybe I can just ask how much time I have. Sorry. 5 minutes? 3. Thank you. I just want to touch briefly on a couple of other issues, Mr. Speaker, that have come up in my riding, in the riding of Cole Harbour Eastern Passage. Economic development. It's an area with good economic development. The communities are strong, well-employed. But, Mr. Speaker, there's a key issue. We have a lot of parkland in my riding, from the Cole Harbour Heritage Park to Rainbow Haven to McCormick's Beach to the Nelson Reserve Lands to now the new McNabbs Island Park, which is a brand new park, one that will be developed in a sustainable, environmental manner that will ensure that the islands are preserved for many, many generations and forever, Mr. Speaker. But at the same time, Mr. Speaker, I think it's important that it be reflected that that is a part of the community of Eastern Passage and that economic development be done through the gateway to the islands, which is through Eastern Passage. And I'm hoping that with the draft management plan that will be developed by the Department of Natural Resources, that will be reflected to ensure that Eastern Passage has its opportunity to have the economic development potential that can come through that. Add to that a trail system that's developing from Cole Harbour into Eastern Passage, Mr. Speaker, and with Fisherman's Cove development, it's a community that has economic development and has a potential for a strong tourism just outside downtown core of Halifax. briefly as well, transportation for those living in the Cole Harbour area, Mr. Speaker, and the Eastern Passage area. There is a requirement to alleviate the congestion of traffic on Caldwell Road and Portland Street. These are crucial issues in that area. It can be resolved if only this government. It is known for 3 years that the city of Halifax has demanded the building of off-ramps on the 111 highway, the circumferential highway, Mr. Speaker, that would allow for the Shearwater bypass, the Shearwater extension over to Caldwell Road. It would do wonders for alleviating traffic concerns on Portland Street, on Caldwell Road. It will make the trip a lot easier into Eastern Passage and into the south end of Cole Harbour, Mr. Speaker. The city's ready to build the road, but the province has never committed the funds in order to build the off-ramps. That is one thing that I know that this government could do easily. I look forward to talking to the Minister of Transportation in detail and supply debate about this specific issue. But it's one that I would suggest, Mr. Speaker, that if this government likes to talk about a transportation infrastructure program for the city of Halifax, well, Mr. Speaker, this is one that's easily done, that can alleviate a lot of traffic concerns, and at the same time, Mr. Speaker, can provide a real opportunity for economic growth in that, open up that land. The industrial development that can happen on Shearwater, Mr. Speaker, is another thing that can be assisted by the extension. All of this can happen if the province would commit to building that off-ramp on the 111 highway, as we like to say, near the pig farm. And Mr. Speaker, that is something that can be done. This government should have made that commitment in this budget in order to ensure that that development can continue. And I do look forward to hopefully having that debate during an election with whomever the candidates are from the other parties. I hope we can all agree that whoever wins the next election, that is a priority for the government, so that Nova Scotians, and particularly the people in my riding, have an opportunity for the economic development in that area, Mr. Speaker. And I look forward to these debates and many others as we get forward to the next election. Thank you.
The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to take the opportunity to, as my colleague has done, address some particular concerns in my riding, the riding of Glace Bay. Received a press release last week, Mr. Speaker, from the Cape Breton District Health Authority, a press release that is about paid public parking for Glace Bay and the Northside General Hospital, which will begin on the 28th of April. And Mr. Speaker, as all good Liberal MLAs do, I very carefully considered what was in that press release before saying anything about it. Gave it a lot of time to think exactly of where would you take a stand with paid parking at a hospital? Is there anything wrong with it? What's right about it? And what's going to be done at both the Glace Bay and Northside General Hospitals, which are two hospitals which have never had the paid parking before. Now, of course, Mr. Speaker, as you would know, there are other areas of the province where that system has been in place for some time. There are other hospitals in Cape Breton where that system has been in place some time. But there are areas throughout the province, and my area is one of them. There are other areas such as the Valley that have some concerns about whether or not you should actually have to pay for parking when you go to a hospital and pay a visit to your friends and families and relatives which may be in that hospital. So, Mr. Speaker, what I'm saying is not taking great exception or great issue with the paid parking issue, but there are some concerns, and there are some concerns that have been expressed to me. You know, the regional healthcare complex has gone to great pains to make sure that not everyone will be affected by this. For instance, if you are a patient in a long-term care, the long-term care floor at the Glace Bay Hospital, you'll be provided with a pass, and that pass you can pass on to your family or friends, perhaps, to get in on a regular basis. The paid parking will not apply to the Veterans Facility in Glace Bay, Tyne-Amera. The paid parking will apply to staff and physicians, so I guess it may be an issue among some staff there that they're being charged now to go to work. It's always a question that comes up. And Mr. Speaker, I must say, this is an issue that for someone in a very urbanized area, it may be no big deal that you're paid for parking. To a rural area, or to an area as small as, I wouldn't call Glace Bay rural, but it certainly is not as big as the metropolitan area, when you're all of a sudden start to pay for parking, it becomes an issue. When you live in an area and you're a senior, or you're on a fixed income or a low income, and you're going to the hospital where you used to pay nothing to park your vehicle, and all of a sudden you're now charged $2 per visit, then it starts to add up. If you had a friend or a relative that's in the hospital and you were, let's say they had been in for a 3-week stay, if you went to visit them on a daily basis, you'll be paying $42. If you went to visit them more than once a day, which a lot of seniors do, if I may use a senior as an example, if you went to visit them, say, in the morning and told them, I'll be back this evening to visit you, if you're going to be paid twice.
Finance on a point of order.
I didn't want to interrupt the member's speech, but I do know that the changes that have been implemented in the other ridings, that people who have residents or patients at the hospital with family members can make provisions to have lower fees. I know that happens in Yarmouth, and I'm sure that if a member does the research, he'll find it's the same thing in his riding. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Glace Bay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And first of all, I'm honored that the finance minister is paying that much attention to what I say. But let me correct one thing, Mr. Speaker. When I talk about a senior visiting, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a relative. They could be visiting a friend. And if they're visiting a friend and they visit twice a day, they're going to be charged $4 in total to pay those visits. And if they're charged over a long period of time, there is no break given by the hospitals. And again, I raise this, Mr. Speaker. I know the importance of raising money for hospitals. I know that the regional healthcare complex has said this money is going to be used for the repair and maintenance of the parking lot itself, or it will be used for the purchase of new equipment. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, that there are going to be those, again, seniors, those on fixed income or low income, who simply will not be able to afford the $42, the $84, whatever the price will total up to. They won't be able to afford that through no fault of their own, which means they will not be going to visit their friends in the hospital, Mr. Speaker, which means the friends will not have their company, which certainly is a part in the healing process of having people pay a visit to you on a regular basis. Now, there are all sorts of exceptions, I guess, and I, Mr. Speaker, may not be aware of them. But there are also those people who will slip through the cracks, whether they be friends, whether they be clergy, whatever the case may be. If this is an added fee, an added increase to them, it eventually adds up to a hardship, which is not necessary. Now, Mr. Speaker, if I can take a look just at the General Hospital itself, which you never had to pay for parking there before. If we recall correctly, in a previous budget, this government cut the budget of the regional healthcare complex by some $8 million. Just walked in and said, we're chopping $8 million from your budget, now you find a way to fix it. Well, all of a sudden, the regional healthcare complex had to start thinking about such things as paid parking. And now you have that $2 charge. But Mr. Speaker, if that side of the House, if the government can prove to me that charging seniors or people on fixed incomes is not an added hardship, it's not an extra burden, then I'd love to see that proof. But unless you're going to say to all seniors and to all people on low and fixed incomes that there must be an escape clause for you somewhere in this, and may I add, Mr. Speaker, that the regional healthcare complex, and perhaps the finance minister talked to them, and they haven't had any complaints about this so far. They announced it a year ago, but they had a slight delay, if you call a year slight. They've had a delay in getting the equipment to put up at the parking lot itself. Now, I dare say once that equipment goes up and you start paying for parking, that the complaints certainly would come in a lot more than if you're not charging and the equipment is not there operating. And let me give you an example of that, Mr. Speaker. The complaints still to this day come in complaining about paying for parking at the University College of Cape Breton, where you pay on a daily basis as well. The charge there in their parking lots is $1, by the way, not $2 that you'll be charged at the regional at the regional healthcare complex now in Glace Bay and in North Sydney. And yes, the students at UCCB, as my colleague says, have to pay $1 a day. I don't think that, I don't know if the staff does or not. I'm not sure of that, but even if they do, they're offered some sort of a deal, but that does not apply to the students. And that's another matter, another issue for another day. But Mr. Speaker, my point here today was, you know, we're faced with a situation where we have a hospital, in this case, Glace Bay, that 33 times last year had to close its emergency department. That if you drove up and paid $1 now to get into the emergency, to get into the parking lot, you may go to the door and find out that the emergency department is not open, or paid $2. So I guess I'm finding it just a little ironic that we're worried about such things as keeping an emergency department open, keeping a New Waterford Consolidated Hospital open, keeping the services that are available at the Northside General open and running on a daily basis. That's a concern, but to this government it pays no heed whatsoever to starting to charge parking at $2 a day for facilities that did not have it. And again, Mr. Speaker, I stress that the difference, I think, here is that these are facilities that have never had that. There are a lot of people, especially in this area, my area, and in other areas of this province, in rural areas, that feel that if you drive into a healthcare facility, you should not have to pay to get in there. But, and I know some Metro members will scratch their head and say, well, what does that, we pay for parking up here all the time. Well, yes, Mr. Speaker, but you have much enhanced transportation system up here, which will take you to a hospital and drop you off. In rural areas, you're forced to take your vehicle there. You have no other choice but to take your vehicle there to get to the hospital. And I'm not saying, again, Mr. Speaker, I'm not disagreeing with the fact that sometimes we have to pay our way. My only point in bringing this up was that there are those people who are going to fall through the cracks here, who are being disadvantaged by all of a sudden having this charge slapped upon them. It may mean that in a lot of cases what they did on a regular basis, what may have become part of their life over the years, paying visits to hospital. A lot of people do that. They may not be able to do that anymore because all of a sudden there is another cost brought about by this government placed upon, in this case, the citizens of Glace Bay and Northside and area. All of a sudden there's another user fee that's there that wasn't there before. And Mr. Speaker, I don't think we hear the real hardships that are associated with all those user fees, those extra costs that are out there that will now prevent people from doing what may have been a normal routine part of their life and may have been contributing a lot more than they actually thought it was contributing to people who are actually part of the healthcare system, who go to visit and make people feel better and take an interest in what's going on in their community. Now, Mr. Speaker, there are a lot more things. I know I don't have the time that I certainly would like to address at this point in time, but I again stress that what led up to this is the fact that in a previous budget there was an $8 million cut from the regional health care complex. Before that, they were not even considering. They did not talk about paid parking in those facilities. They did have paid parking. It was instituted from day one at the regional health care complex at the Sydney facility, Mr. Speaker. But I would dare say that was, there were complaints, I know, at the time when that was instituted, and probably there still are to this day that there are complaints that you have to pay to visit that facility. So in closing, Mr. Speaker, with the remaining time that I left, I think I have a couple of minutes left, 3 minutes left. I'd like to remind the government that, it may seem clear to them sometimes that this is the obvious thing to do, to tell district health authorities, to tell the regional health care complex, yes, by all means, go ahead with paid parking and institute it. But let's not forget, let's never forget that there are people who are affected by this that we may not be considering, that there may be exceptions that are made, and as I mentioned, there are some exceptions. I know the finance minister was trying, I think. I'll give him the benefit of a doubt that the finance minister was helping me in what I was trying to get across by telling me there will be exceptions made for family members. But it's not always the case that we've covered everybody, that we've thought of everybody, and that we know that there are going to be some instances where there are people who would normally pay and visit hospitals on a regular basis, that we may be stopping them from doing that. And I guess in saying so, I would hope, and I know that the regional healthcare officials, who are very efficient in their work, I have a great deal of respect for the senior administration at the regional healthcare complex, and I know that the work that they do. They have a great public relations department, and at all facilities of the regional healthcare complex, they have, I would say, bar none, the best staff and facilities that are available in this province, Mr. Speaker. So I would suggest to them, though, respectfully suggest to them, that perhaps we very carefully look at how this is going to be administered and who's going to be affected by it, and if there's anything that can be done, if problems occur, if there are problems that are brought to their attention, that they deal with them on an individual basis and assess the situation. There are some people who simply will not be able to afford the parking charges that are going to be there now in both Glace Bay and area and North Side and area. Those areas are a great deal of the citizens there would be seniors, Mr. Speaker, and also a large number would be on low and fixed income. So I would appeal to them that certainly they take this under consideration and ask them to give it the respectful perusal that it requires to make sure that everybody is being treated fairly, Mr. Speaker, and I thank you for the time.
The honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I very much appreciate this opportunity to say a few words. And I'm sure that the member from Chester St. Margaret's would very much prefer other people in the House not to chat away while he's got a few minutes of speaking. Okay. Basically, the member, Mr. Speaker, the member from Chester St. Margaret's may chat away by times, but he does not necessarily chat away that often in this House. So I think he prefers the opportunity that he has to speak to himself. But, Mr. Speaker, this supplies debate is a very important debate because I think it's always very sensible when many people in this House refer to the Blue Book and things like that. That's good because I think, Mr. Speaker, the actual fact is we are working on a similar book of commitments and promises for the next 4 years. And the specific goals may be somewhat different from the last 4 years, that is, the specific goals, but the values, and I underline the word values, are similar. We will live within our means, and another value that we'll be pursuing, we will lower the taxes, and we will do that, I think, in the next 4 years. Many Nova Scotians will support these values because they have in the past, and I think we're going in the right direction, that's for sure. Basically, our commitment is, and our commitment has been, to have a strong economy and to sound fiscal management as a basis for a healthy society. A society that can meet the needs and supply the services that Nova Scotians want. Of course, before we committed the promises and the values and the goals we had in the book, of course, we had to get the House in a good financial order, and that's what we did. Certainly, at least on this side of the House, most Nova Scotians, of course, we appreciate. We appreciate most Nova Scotians did pay their taxes. We understand that, certainly on this side of the House. Nova Scotians can spend their money better than governments can. Basically, they start off with their money, they pay the taxes and other bills and stuff like this, and they can spend it better than governments can. And certainly in the past 4 years, we've all shared in the sacrifices that we've had to make. But now we can share some of these gains that we have gained. Certainly on this side of the House, people we realize that people understand their needs and better know their needs and the way to use their money. And certainly, we certainly trust Nova Scotians to allow them to keep on to their money and do the best that they can in that regard. But, Mr. Speaker, it certainly was very, very interesting because the provincial economy is very much improving in Nova Scotia. We're not at the top of the list, but we're certainly not at the bottom of the list. And we're near the top of the list, and basically we're going in the right direction. I understand that most people realize that there are 10 provinces in Canada, and we are near the top of the best performing economies in Canada versus not near the top and not the bottom. And certainly we have to go in that direction. I very much appreciate the speech from the throne, and basically they do point out what we do plan to do with the economy and the values we have, where are we going with that. And certainly just basically we are introducing we are now talking about Nova Scotia's second balanced budget in a row. After 40 years, maybe it's about to have that happen. And certainly we are going to lower taxes for everybody. And certainly we'll be helping businesses by bringing Nova Scotia's small business tax threshold in line with the most recent federal budget. And certainly we are going to enhance our business retention and expansion program. And there's very many various plans that would do this. But we certainly want business to expand in Nova Scotia and also the retention they have. And certainly there are many, many things that we've done that will take us down this road. And I don't have the time to talk about it all, but I think we are all aware that we're certainly going in that direction. One of the things is that we're going to introduce Brand Nova Scotia to promote our province as a place to live, work, and raise a family. And certainly I have the honor of representing Chester St. Margaret's. And one of the most thrilling things is the people in Chester St. Margaret's are one of the best Christmas tree producers in Nova Scotia. In fact, I've heard the figures that basically out of all the Christmas trees exported from Canada, half come from Nova Scotia. Out of those that are exported from Nova Scotia, they come from Lunenburg County, and half of those come from New Rawson area. Long story short, it's very, very proud that we're doing with all these things. And Brand Nova Scotia, we've got a very good product to sell, and we're certainly going to encourage them to go around the world with what we can do. Certainly, we will be making new. The other thing is we will be making new investments to improve our roads, highways, and bridges. Oh my goodness! And basically, the EMO and the great shock that all Nova Scotia had. But before that, of course, too, we did have roads that needed repairs, bridges that needed repairs, and we're going down that direction. And thank goodness it is. It's certainly. Many parts of Nova Scotia, they attract tourists. The second biggest business in Nova Scotia is people from inside the province, outside the province, just respecting and visiting parts of Nova Scotia. And it's so nice when they can get there without ruining their cars and things like that. And we're certainly have a good plan and moving forward in that regard. And of course, another wise plan is to create a capital district transportation authority where everybody that lives in HRM sit down and they talk about a plan, not just one whimsical plan for this week and another one for the next week. They sit down and they get a good authority that makes a good plan to the transportation authority in HRM, because HRM is a beautiful county, obviously, but it's getting more and more crowded. So we have to make sure that everybody wants to get along in that regard. They don't want to spend years and years when they should have normally spent only a few minutes. The other thing is, of course, and in my riding, of course, we're doing, I think, very encouraging many people, and there are indeed, I tell you just if I have a few minutes, about some international companies that are based in Chester St. Margaret's. I'm very, very proud of it because it just proves that many people, not only Chester St. Margaret's, but also all across Canada, or the province of Nova Scotia, that they have about the 3 C's. One, many companies in Nova Scotia are competent, and they are very competitive, and they're classical communicators. That is, they're telling the people in the province, they're telling people in Canada, they're telling people all across the world that yes, they have a very good service or they have a very good model, and it's, they say it's very competitive because it's properly priced, and they're doing this, and my oh my, it's so proud. One of the companies I think of right off is Nautel in Hackett's Cove, and they are transmitters, and they go all over the world. In fact, many people might, I think many people realize that the volunteer head of the Red Tape for Reduction Task Force is headed by the person, Mr. David Grace, who also runs an hotel. And he's doing a wonderful job, and, but basically, they're competing with worldwide competition, but doing a very, very competitive, very good job with that. And of course, when you get to Chester, you might be aware of GN Plastics. And GN Plastics, thermo heating, everything made out of plastic. Of course, that was the company originally, Chester Plastic, which is a good company, but GN Plastics makes the machines that do that. And literally, they deal with over 50 companies in the world. And it's very, very wonderful what they're doing, and they're very, very competitive. Many people want that. And so again, it just proves that many people in Nova Scotia, I know my riding better than other ridings. I certainly in Chester St. Margaret's, we are very, very competitive worldwide. And I think everybody appreciates that that's the way Nova Scotia should be. And that's the reason that's where we're going too. Another interesting thing was Louisiana Pacific. Louisiana Pacific, they came up, many people, Louisiana Pacific runs about, I think, 34 companies that are dealing with wood and things like that. So they came up to give the whole plant at East River an award for going to hemlock versus hemlock. And some of the people had never been to Nova Scotia before, and they said, oh my goodness, what a beautiful place it is. And the other thing is, of course, they did point out that some of their plants that they deal with around the world, about 1/3 of their people retire on every year. And they realized that many people work at East River. They've been there for 25 to 30 years. And it just proves, again, many Nova Scotian workers are very, very dedicated and very, very competent to do all that. And so we're on the right track. Mr. Speaker, just what time would I have? About 2 minutes. Well, time flies when you're having fun. But long story short, I feel very, very pleased to have this opportunity to say a few words of supply. But basically, when you hear all the supplies and things like that, we do have a promise of a balanced government. We do have what we've been seeing, a very sensible government, too. There are some people in this House that say they want to spend anything all the time, and some don't want to spend anything. This is a sensible, balanced government. Thank you. My, oh, my. And the other thing, Mr. Speaker, we are encouraging all sorts of great companies in Nova Scotia. Keep them up. So in the long run, I certainly would like to feel strongly that there is benefit for everyone in this supply, and I very much appreciate that opportunity. Do I have whatever? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Motion is carried. Hello, sir. Recognize the Deputy House Leader.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I call for the estimates for the Department of Health.
Minister, we'll give you a few moments to get your staff together. She's doing a fine job. Doing a fine job.
No, he said broom.
No, we didn't say that.
18 minutes. That's what you told me. Anyway. What is it, 58 minus 70? Do the math. 19. Chair recognizes the honourable member for Clare, and you have 19 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this afternoon I want to talk about some local issues. Mr. Chairman, we know that this Tory government last election campaigned in replacing the 4 regional health boards with 9 district health authorities. Mr. Chairman, as the Minister is aware, in the Blue Book, the government promised to give more responsibilities to communities over healthcare decision making. And I just want to review or go back what happened to our DHA, the Southwest Nova District Health Authority, last year, Mr. Chairman. We know that technically they were not in control in making decisions. I don't know how many times I lost count after 3 times by resubmitting their business plan to downtown Halifax to the Minister of Health before any decisions could be made public, Mr. Chairman. I know last year, and I'm just going back to one of the headlines with the Yarmouth paper, Health Authority facing $3 million shortage. That was at that time, $3.3 million. Initially, when they were looking at the budget. But we know, Mr. Chairman, with ongoing discussions between our DHA and with the Department of Health, and of course, let me bring you back. This was before the annual meeting of the Tory party that was coming very shortly.
The Tories don't party, do they?
Well, we know just before the AGM, their AGM, that the Department of Health came up with $22.5 million. So, of course, with this additional funding, the DHA's, ours anyway, Mr. Chairman, that shortfall was reduced to $1.8 million. But before any decisions could be announced at home, Mr. Chairman, these revised business plan had again to be approved by the Minister of Health or by someone in the department. And Mr. Chairman, I want to start off by looking at some of these final decisions that were announced. And I'll table this. This was the press release issued by the Southwest Nova. I'll table it after I'm done. Thank you. By the Southwest Nova District Health Authority, dated March 21st, 2002. So this was with approval from the Department of Health. So they had to make up the difference of $1.8 million. So by by making up the difference, there's a couple items here on this list I want to, I know I won't have time to go over all of them, but I want to start off with the satellite blood collection fee. The DHA, Mr. Chairman, was planning to raise $80,000 by introducing the $7 blood collection fee in 4 of our communities, in Lockport, in Barrington Passage, in Meteghan, and Freeport. Well, Mr. Chairman, Meteghan is in my riding, in the constituency of Clare. I've had an opportunity to raise this, to bring it to the attention of the House on several occasions, Mr. Chairman. As this announcement came down last March, it was indicated to the people in our riding, as well as the people in Shelburne County and in Digby County. If people decided to drive up to the Roseway Hospital in Shelburne, or to the Yarmouth Regional, or to the Digby General, blood fees would be free. But at the same time, if individuals decided to go for blood work at these 4 blood satellite clinics, a blood fee of $7 would be charged. Mr. Chairman, as I raised concerns about, there's many individuals in these communities throughout these counties, the Tri-County, Digby, Yarmouth, and Shelburne County, that don't have a choice. Don't have a choice to drive up to the nearest hospital for free blood work. A lot of these individuals don't own vehicles. And as you're probably aware, Mr. Chairman, I'm sure you're aware that many rural communities throughout our province don't have a public transportation system. So for a lot of people, that choice don't exist. And for a lot of people to basically be charged $7 for blood work, Mr. Chairman, I think, and I still believe, that this was wrong, that a lot of people, unfortunately, because of transportation, had no choice. And at the same time, in terms of who basically are going to these satellite blood clinics. We know, Mr. Chairman, a lot of these individuals are seniors living on limited income. We know that there are individuals living on disability pensions. Again, individuals living on limited income. So for them, going for blood work once a week or twice a week or every week, Mr. Chairman, where will these individuals find the money for these get their blood work done? I have said time and time again that I hope that no one will put their health at risk, Mr. Speaker, by having to turn to these blood clinics and pay $7 for their blood work. Mr. Chairman, as one individual had indicated to me, and I had several calls, and I still do, from individuals that don't believe this is fair. This is purely discrimination, why some or most people have it done for free while others are being charged $7 to getting their blood work done. This individual, Mr. Chairman, I recall indicated to me, he's now retired, of course, a senior, worked all his life, paid taxes all his life. And he told me he just hoped that one day when he did retire, that healthcare system would be there for him. But was he wrong? He was asking me, where am I supposed to find, this money in my limited income coming in to pay for my blood work? So I guess my first question to the minister, I'm sure the Department of Health, the local district authority has had a chance to monitor these individuals that are going to these satellite blood clinics. that are not driving up or going to the hospital for free blood work. I'm just wondering, has the department, with the DHA and probably with the doctors in those areas, have they been monitoring these individuals, to make sure that no one is jeopardizing their health, no one is putting their health at risk? So I guess my first question to the minister, could the minister indicate to me if there is some follow-up done to make sure that no one, Mr. Chairman, is putting their health at risk?
Thank you, member. The chair will now recognize the Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, first of all, I'd like to point out again that the satellite clinics that exist in the DHAs are there for the convenience of the population. And if they weren't able to charge a small fee for the convenience, then they wouldn't be able to exist. We are not in a position to be able to expand all services as much as we might like to. So, Mr. Chair, in answer to the question about an assessment, we have not done an assessment as yet because in some areas these satellite services have not been in place for even a full year. Obviously, they will be assessed both for their cost and their convenience to see if they are generally appreciated or not, and if they're worth doing from a health perspective. And Mr. Chair, as I say, for those who may mind paying the fee, I do understand that. But before these were set up, they certainly wouldn't have had a choice. They would have had to go to the hospital for the blood test regardless. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Minister. Chair recognizes the Honourable Member from Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I agree with the Minister. This is probably seen by many as a convenience for individuals in these communities or near those communities to go in for blood work. So these individuals won't have to travel to their nearest hospital to have blood work done for free. But at the same time, Mr. Chairman, there are individuals, they don't see this as a convenience. The fact that they don't have a choice. They know they have to have some blood work done. Unfortunately, as I pointed out earlier, because of transportation available to them, they basically will have their blood work done at home. So does the minister recognize that some individuals attending these satellite blood clinics don't see this as a convenience to them?
Thank you, Member. I'd like to recognize the Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as I believe I indicated, I am sure there are some individuals in many areas who would like to see such services offered for free as they are in the hospitals. And in an ideal world, that would be the case. But what DHAs are trying to do here is to offer a convenient service to the majority of the population. And to do that, they need to recoup the costs of providing that service. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member from Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to hear the minister, indicating that they haven't done some assessment, but they certainly are looking in that direction. Mr. Chairman, this new blood collection fee was introduced several months ago. Maybe with the data that's coming in, and especially the fact that the department, along with the district health authority, will be doing an evaluation on just to make sure. And I guess one of the concerns that I have is just as I pointed out, and I'm sure no one in this House, Mr. Chairman, would want to see one individual, risking their health because they can't afford that blood work done for the $7 blood collection fee. So I guess my next question to the minister, with this evaluation, with this assessment, Is the department ready to acknowledge it? I'm sure that they have had some calls, because I have, and I'm sure the members from the neighboring constituencies have received calls as well from individuals complaining that they can't afford paying for this blood collection fee. So I'm wondering, Mr. Chairman, is the department looking at either waiving the fee or providing some assistance for individuals, Mr. Chairman, that have difficulties in coming up with this blood collection fee?
Thank you, member. I'll direct that question to the Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, my staff are not aware of any calls coming to the department complaining about this fee. And as I said, given the costs of health care, if an assessment or an evaluation reveals that the clinics are not helpful, then perhaps the clinics will be discontinued. The issue of some people having to obtain transportation to a hospital for blood collection would continue. I doubt very much that we're at a stage yet in Nova Scotia or in Canada to be able to provide satellite blood collection clinics without being able to recoup the cost. That being said, certainly in the primary care initiatives that we're looking at introducing over the next few years, which they include the idea of collaborative practice with a number of different clinicians practicing together, it is possible that blood collection service might be a part of that, but that a movement in that direction is still very far from complete. In fact, hasn't even begun in some areas. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Minister. The member has approximately 3 minutes left. The Honourable Member from Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in the DHA's press release of March 21st, 2002, they indicate that they are planning to raise $80,000 from this blood collection fee. I don't know if the minister is aware, but I guess my question would be, could she indicate to the committee how much the DHA, the Southwest Nova District Health Authority, has collected in this past year?
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is not information we have with us, but that is information that is easily obtainable, and I undertake to provide it to the House. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Minister. Honourable Member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the DHA has not raised the $80,000 as they had projected for this current year, I'm just wondering, will the DHA, will they have to cut somewhere else, or will the department, will they provide them with additional funding to help to make their deficit, I guess, there?
Direct that question to the Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, the government has already this year helped the DHAs with their general deficits, but when referring in particular to this program, I think obviously each DHA would look at this program and see whether it was covering its costs and make a judgment about the service based on that, and they are the best ones in the position to do that, not the department. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Minister. The member from Clare, you have approximately 1 minute, and I'll remind you that you indicated that you would table a paper that you're reading from, and just a reminder, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my last question, with the minister indicating that the department will certainly be undertaking some assessment, some evaluation on this new blood collection fee that was introduced in 2002, will the minister commit to table a copy of that assessment in this committee or in the House at a later date, so that members will have an understanding exactly how this new blood collection fee has worked in the DHA.
Would the Minister of Health have a very brief answer to that question, please?
Certainly, Mr. Chair, and when the evaluation is done, we'd be glad to inform members of the House about it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Minister. The time has now expired for the Liberal caucus. We'll now call on the honourable member from Dartmouth North. Time is 3:44.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, my time will be somewhat brief, and I will share my time with the honourable member from Hants East. But, Mr. Chairman, before I begin, I want to say welcome to the minister to her new portfolio. I won't congratulate her because it might be premature and she may not wish to be congratulated on moving from education to health. Both are giant portfolios. They require a tremendous amount of one's time and a tremendous amount of work, and both are very critical portfolios, ones in which meet the challenge and the test of time. I will also want to make mention now that for the public record, the former Minister of Health and I have had an excellent rapport with respect to issues that affected my community, and I want that to be a matter of record on a couple of occasions when, in fact, I had asked the Minister of Health to address a couple of issues in the constituency. I was quite pleased with the way that those matters were addressed, and so were the constituents who were directly affected by those particular issues. I want to tell the minister that I'm dealing with the estimates, the supplementary estimates, and I'm on page 1212 of that of the health supplementary budgets, and I want to talk about the senior citizen secretariat. Again, I want to compliment this government on hiring the executive director for the senior secretariat, and a very capable individual by the name of Valerie White. I want you to know that it was 4 years under the Liberal government that, in fact, we did not have an executive director for the senior secretariat, and I also want you to know that very little to nothing was done as a result of that. So I want to tell you no, there is no hope. I want you to know that there is no hope of my crossing the floor, but I do want you to know that I believe that we ought to acknowledge competency when in fact it comes forward, and I acknowledge support when it comes forward as well. And that, I want to say, is what's happened here under the senior secretariat and the hiring of Valerie White. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going down that road of rabbit tracks. I'm talking about the competency of the executive director that was appointed to the senior citizen secretariat. And I want to tell you, though, that I see that there has been an increase in the budget from the forecasted year of 2002-2003 to the fiscal year coming up of 2003-2004. It's not a major increase, but it is an increase in the senior secretariat's budget. Now, I know that the seniors have ongoing meetings with a group of 9 citizens across this province who represent a large number of senior citizens through various organizations. I also know that the senior secretariat produces a seniors program, which in itself is an excellent program. Allow me to tell you that many people who come to my constituency office who are seniors pick up this program because the wealth of information that it has is second to none, and it certainly lets them know of the agencies and organizations by which they can make contact with respect to reference. I also know that the seniors secretariat administers or works with the Seniors Expo program each and every year. And here is an issue that I want the minister to be aware of. One issue is that the senior secretariat, my understanding is that they're going to be holding the Seniors Expo at the exhibition park in the Atlantic Winter Fair, at the Atlantic Winter Fair site. And I don't know if the minister is aware. First of all, I guess let me backtrack. One, I would recommend that the minister advise me as to what the increased numbers represent, the increased dollars, I should say, represent. And number two, if in fact the Seniors Expo is going to be held at Exhibition Park, and if in fact because of that the minister thinks or believes that this restricts a number of seniors from partaking in the Seniors Expo because of the distance outside. And number three, is it possible for the minister to make arrangements with the World Trade and Convention Center, where the Senior Secretariat has always been held for many years, with respect to making park access and accessibility for seniors to be available there? So that's just a minor start for now with respect to that issue of Senior Secretariat.
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, I agree with you about Valerie White. She is an excellent person and always brings seniors' concerns to the table quickly. The main reason for the increases the member from Dartmouth North asked about were MCP merit increases, 3% salary increases, and increases in some operational expenses such as advertising and other miscellaneous expenses that would be in various publications, including the publications that they put out. In terms of the holding of the Seniors Expo out at Exhibition Park, I believe that was a suggestion put forward by some seniors themselves who didn't like coming downtown necessarily, and I will get back to the member about future plans. I know we had some busing arrangements to take seniors from town out there, so I'm not sure if it's a wash in terms of numbers preferring it out there or numbers preferring it in town, but I will get back to the member about that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Member from Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, through to the minister, I'm pleased that the minister will get back to me. If the minister is going to get back to me on this particular issue, Exhibition Park versus the World Trade and Convention Center, I hope that there's been some assessment and analysis done with respect to attendance at the Atlantic Winter Fair, because I do believe that last year may have been the first time by which, and this is not the first time, it'll be last year was the first time in which it was held at the Exhibition Park. And I'm wondering if, in fact, there are attendance records that indicate that this is a wise move, and that, in fact, there are more people participating as a result of that, and there are greater venue avenues for individuals promoting their wares to the seniors community. So if that is in fact something that the minister is prepared to do, then fine. And I appreciate the minister getting back to me on that issue. The other issue with respect to the Senior Secretariat, and I say this in a way to let the minister be aware, because I had spoken with the executive director, Valerie White, on this issue, and that's the issue that all seniors do not feel as though they're represented at the table by the Senior Secretariat. And we know that there's a group of 9, and we can identify the organizations that they are, in fact, a part of. But there is a group of some, approximately, from my understanding, and I'm not totally familiar with this, but my understanding is speaking with some seniors, particularly around seniors housing, around seniors who are living in seniors housing complexes, that they are somewhat excluded as a result of their association of some nature, and I wish I could be more specific on it, but they feel that their voice is not being heard at the Senior Secretariat, and I'm wondering if the minister has heard anything with respect to that, and if she hasn't, will she speak to the executive director on this issue, because I know the executive director is aware of it. And the number is, I believe, some 5,000 seniors. And I do know that the member for the new electoral district of Portland South Valley, Dartmouth South Portland Valley. That's a mouthful. It has 5 seniors in his constituency, and he is aware that at meetings that there are some of those seniors who feel that they're not represented by the senior secretariat. So I'm wondering, my question is, after all that preamble, my question to the minister is will you look into this matter, apprise me and let me know if in fact it is your opinion that all seniors are fairly represented, or if there is a need to have more seniors' views being put before the senior secretariat. And rather than stand up here again so that the minister will be aware, that's question number 1. Question number 2 would be, does the minister keep a record of the number of recommendations that are forwarded by the senior secretariat, and those recommendations that have been approved, and those recommendations which are still outstanding? I guess it would be somewhat like a report card, whereby you would report to, to your government, if not the legislature. And I know that there's not an annual report put out by the senior secretariat, or I haven't seen an annual report, and there may very well be. But if there is an annual report put out by the senior secretariat, what kind of statistical information, briefly, does it contain?
Thank you, member. I'd like to recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll answer the second question first. The Senior Citizens Secretariat does have a statistical officer, so they would certainly have a record of the submissions that they've made and recommendations that have been put forward to the department, and certainly they would know which recommendations have been accepted and which have not, and which are pending. And I will endeavor to get that information for the member from Dartmouth North. On the first issue of seniors, particularly seniors in some housing facilities feeling that they're not represented, I have not personally heard that. The 2 seniors' residences in my riding, they do complain about not being represented. They don't think sometimes the Department of Community Services listens to them, or the Department of Health listens to them, or the Department of Housing listens to them. I haven't heard specific complaints about the Secretariat, but I'm sure that is probably true, that they feel that their voice is not heard on their issues as strongly as it might be. And that is certainly an option to look at what we might do to affect some change there, if we can find a way to do that in a fair way. I know that there are a lot of issues, that bother seniors in some of our housing complexes, and one of the big ones has to do with the age of some of the new residents, for example, but there are many, many others. And certainly I can undertake to look into that and discuss that with the Senior Citizen Secretariat. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The honourable member from Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to the minister, I specifically didn't bring up the issue with respect to age of some of the residents that are now living in seniors' residence, because I want to deal with that through the appropriate channel of the Minister of Community Services and Department of Housing. Because as the minister has acknowledged, it is a very serious issue, along with a number of other serious issues that the seniors brought up. But I didn't think it was in the domain of the minister, but yet I was pleased to see that the minister had made comment to that. I want to go to the supplementary budget estimates again, and I want to go to page 12.9. And 12.9, of course, is the pharmacare program. And now, as you know, this government has significantly increased the pharmacare program, both the copay and the premium rate. with respect to the pharmacare over the term in which this government has been in power. It's ironic that this year is an election year, and I had already told a number of seniors, not that I've got some kind of a crystal ball or some sort of magic wand which opens up the skies and tells people what will or will not happen. But what I do have is this: is that I did tell many of the seniors not to expect an increase in their pharmacare payments this year because it was an election year. Now, I know that the minister would not, nor her government, would have ever done anything like that, or even contemplated taking such an action. I'm sure that would not be the reason why there's been a freeze this year on the pharmacare pay, both the copay and the premium. That there is no increase in pharmacare. I would want to ask the minister if, in fact, this is a freeze for this year only on both the premium rate and the copay, or if there will be an increase in the future year or the future years of the pharmacare